China sends ships into Taiwan's waters, saying they're humanitarian patrols. As a fatal food poisoning case grips the nation, investigators find toxic acid in the body of one of the deceased. Environmental groups call for lawmakers to allow a hike in electricity prices. Plus, disabled children of foreigners in Taiwan are often barred from getting the support they need. We meet one family facing the consequences. Hello and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. China says a group of sea agencies conducted humanitarian and maritime security patrols around Taiwan's Kinmen Islands. While some Taiwanese fishermen in the area welcome the increased security, law enforcement agencies are wary of China's presence. Jaime Okan reports.
Chinese fishing vessels operating around Taiwan's outlying islands of Kinmen. These incursions are becoming more common, with Taiwan's Coast Guard reporting that it drove away 9 Chinese fishing boats this week alone. Taiwan's Coast Guard says it continues to enforce the law around the country's waters.
就是常态性的执法，我们都依执法的 SOP 在进行哈。应该要驱离的会驱离，应该要登检的或者是扣留的，我们都依法行政。
The recent increase in Chinese vessels began after the death of 2 Chinese fishers in February, whose vessel was chased by Taiwan's Coast Guard near Kinmen. That incident prompted China to increase its patrols to ensure the safety of its own citizens, as these waters are often choppy but are essential for fishing. Several Chinese fishing and maritime agencies are now conducting joint humanitarian patrols to ensure maritime safety. Officials and locals in Kinmen say that more ships should be welcomed as they could help with rescue efforts if needed.
救难这个事情是无国界的，应该是会赞同这个想法。一味的立场是乐观其成。
我们这边的民众有发生什么状况，或者呢对岸乡亲有发生一些出海发生状况，基本上我觉得在人道救援的角度来讲，都是一个很好的方法。
But Taiwan's Coast Guard and law enforcement agencies are wary of China's heightened presence. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has threatened to use military force to bring the country under its control. Chinese warplanes already fly around Taiwan on a daily basis, and analysts are concerned that upped patrols could become a new normal.
But the reality is, China likes to assert its control over an area normally by conducting law enforcement operations there. Look at the South China Sea. That's what they claim to be doing when they go toe-to-toe with the Philippines, a couple times a month.
This form of coercion, sometimes called gray zone warfare, is putting a strain on Taiwan's already limited resources because the country needs to respond to every incursion. And so the question now is what Taiwan can do as it's faced with pressure on both the military and now law enforcement around its outlying islands.
The combination of pressures on Taiwan from China, it's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? It's everyday military aircraft, every day a presence around Kinmen, balloons now frequently. I think that what Taiwan needs to do is focus on investing in low-cost capabilities that they can use to monitor these activities, and then that gives them more flexibility to respond as a situation develops.
As Taiwan tries to manage the increasing range of threats, it'll have to make sure it can do so, both without escalating the situation and expending its resources. John Su and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
As tensions continue to rise in the Taiwan Strait, vehicles carrying anti-ship missiles have been spotted in Taitung in the southeast. The vehicles drew the attention of locals, drawing speculation about their sudden appearance. Defense experts say deployment of these anti-ship missile units is geared at preventing potential blockades or invasions of Taiwan.
雄风2型反舰飞弹搭配超音速的雄风3型反舰飞弹，来对敌人的船舰进行反制。那么海风大队未来的任务很可能就是会在台东，还有就是甚至到更南边的，就是恒春半岛一带，遂行这个巴士海峡的封锁任务。
The de facto U.S. embassy in Taiwan is set to get its next leader. According to Taiwan's central news agency, Raymond Green will take over from Sandra Oudkirk as director of the American Institute in Taiwan. Green was the AIT's deputy director from 2018 to 2021. Since leaving Taiwan, he served as the deputy chief of mission at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. The fatal food poisoning case that's shocked Taiwan this week has a new legal twist. The restaurant involved isn't insured. As investigators dig for clues as to what went wrong, there are new questions about who will pay compensation. John Van Trieste has this update.
Businessman Li Fangxuan stays silent as he arrives at a meeting over his scandal-hit restaurant chain, Bolam Kopitiam. 2 people have died and over a dozen have fallen ill after eating at a popular branch in a Taipei shopping mall. One autopsy has found a fatal toxin that can grow naturally on certain foods that aren't properly stored. But officials say they still aren't ruling out foul play. While investigators try to figure out what went wrong, the reporters here have new questions. Chief among them, who's going to compensate victims and their families? It turns out the restaurant chain stopped paying its insurance as it struggled with debts. Even officials still don't know the answer, but it could fall to the shopping mall or the food court the restaurant was in.
所以如果这一次的事件可以落在远东跟大时代的公共意外责任险里面的范围内，那我就相信对于受难者家属会放下心中的大石。
The city has asked this insurer to explain within 2 days whether the restaurant falls under its coverage. The restaurant chain's legal troubles don't end there, though. It was supposed to shut down all its Taipei branches, but it kept a restaurant it runs under a different name open.
没有如实说有另外这家分店，我们也依照食安法会来进行开罚。同时，对于产品责任险并没有缴费而保单失效，我们一样会依法来开罚，都会酌情从重来开罚。
Taipei's health department has since decided on a $78,000 fine. Taipei's Legal Affairs Committee says it will help victims' families file to confiscate the restaurant's assets, meaning insured or not, it will face financial penalties. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
To learn more about the legal implications of the food poisoning scandal, John Van Trieste spoke to lawyer John Eastwood.
How legal is it in Taiwan for a company of this size to be uninsured for liability purposes?
Well, it's not legal. I mean, under the Taiwan law, and I've talked with my colleagues about this. It's like they are under Taiwan's rules. They're required to have insurance. So that's as a starter point. That's a kind of a crazy thing for them to be doing. They shouldn't have let it lapse. And on the flip side of it, the officials also should have known. Because it's they have so many regulatory, there's inspections, there's all sorts of kind of food safety things that occur on a regular basis. As
the official cause of death in these cases or illness has not been made public yet, but let's say if it were improper food storage, for instance, do you see any jail time or other punishments?
It depends on the degree of recklessness. You can actually have a form of reckless. A homicide through reckless acts, and there can be criminal liability for that. You also will have tort liability. That's you have the responsibility to pay for, and there will be financial responsibility, a responsibility that they probably won't be able to make because they didn't bother keeping up their insurance.
How symptomatic of a wider problem in terms of food safety or safety culture in general is this in Taiwan's case?
Between 2011 and say 2014, that there were a lot of these things about, gutter oil and olive oil that was fake. It was like cottonseed oil and a plasticizer being used to replace palm oil in foods and drinks and things like that. So there really was a time where it seemed as if Taiwan really didn't give a damn. You get to the period after that leading up to 2018 and the numbers get back to normal. So Taiwan's had some ups and downs on this in the past, but generally speaking, serious death-causing food poisoning is relatively rare statistically in Taiwan.
Once again, that was lawyer John Eastwood speaking to John Van Trieste about food safety and the law in Taiwan. Average mortgage loans for Taiwanese young adults have hit a record high. Statistical research has found that such loans averaged around $270,000 last year, an increase of around $87,000 from 10 years ago. Average mortgage loans were highest in Taipei, with monthly rates soaring to over $1,500 and resulting in the lowest proportion of young adult home buyers nationwide. Taiwan's government has launched a preferential housing loan program to make it easier for young people to buy a home, but some say they're still feeling the pressure.
在薪水没有涨的状态下，那只好减少消费，就减少外食啊，减少吃大餐，甚至少看几场电影。
Taiwan's main opposition party, the Kuomintang, has launched a digital platform in a bid to attract young voters. The party says its KMT studio will give an entry point into politics for young people. The KMT says it will partner with digital education providers to offer information on topics like digital marketing and AI literacy. It's part of a recent push to attract more young people into the party. The KMT failed to win back power in January's presidential election, setting the stage for its longest ever period in opposition. Taiwan's Water Resources Agency says the country's reservoirs only have enough water to last just over 3 months. In a report, the agency said that rainwater collected in reservoirs so far this year was as low as 30% of average. They also said that given uncertainties around spring rain and upcoming agricultural needs, the water supply must be closely monitored. In response, the government has called for improved water management and conservation. Environmental groups are calling on opposition lawmakers not to obstruct a hike in power prices. Once again, John Van Trieste has this story.
Protesters outside the legislature have a message for the opposition Kuomintang and Taiwan People's Party. Let a planned increase in electricity prices go ahead. The two parties have called for a temporary freeze on the plan, which would see the average electricity bill rise by 11%. Taiwan's electricity is among the cheapest in the world, but state-owned power company Taipower loses billions of US dollars a year, despite government subsidies. These environmentalists say subsidies prop up not just the power company, but the industrial sector, at taxpayers' expense.
大家可以想象，你的电价成本将近4块钱，但是你的售电的1度电才1.97块，是非常不合理的。我们这样子在补贴这个高污染的产业，这是我们觉得很不合理的哈。也应该要把发电所带来的环境跟生态跟健康的成本都把它计入里面，就让工业业用电，如果你要用很多的电，你就应该要付出应有的成本，而不是用全民来补贴。
The two opposition parties, though, are sticking to their call for a month-long delay to price hikes to give time for cross-party negotiations on the matter.
电价的调整是不是要具有民主的可监控性？那这件事情，我相信相关的法案提出来讨论的时候，大家可以进一步的交换意见。
According to rules the legislature agreed to in 2015, though, the final decision on whether to raise prices lies with the Economy Ministry. Meaning, freeze or not, the higher prices environmentalists want may still be eventually on their way. Delphine Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, Taiwan's Environment Ministry has a plan to fight the negative impacts of fast fashion. Find out how after the break.
This month's top hits on TaiwanPlus. Recognize these characters? Join us as we delve into their design, exploring the intersection of visual culture and identity.
It's made to be enjoyed. It gives you an impression, and it's that impression.
In this new season of Craft Soul, immerse yourself in the stunning creations and inspirational journeys of Taiwan's young creators.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Aziz Muller. You're listening to the Ripple Effect podcast.
Ready to make a difference? Dive into overlooked environmental topics and ignite positive change around you. Craving for more? Explore Taiwan's culinary treasures with Straight to the Source, a flavorful journey through ingredient stories. Vibrant and original programs, exclusively on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching Taiwan Plus News. 45 people have died in a bus crash in South Africa. The driver lost control of the vehicle and it broke through a barrier and plunged off a bridge in northeastern Limpopo province, around 300 kilometers north of Johannesburg. The bus caught fire when it hit the ground. The only survivor, an 8-year-old girl, was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. China has scrapped heavy tariffs it placed on Australian wine 3 years ago as bilateral ties improve. Beijing says it's willing to continue to strengthen relations with Canberra.
鉴于中国相关葡萄酒市场情况发生变化，不再对原产于澳大利亚的进口相关葡萄酒征收反倾销税和反补贴税。
Beijing slapped billions of dollars worth of trade barriers around Australian exports in 2020 when tensions between the two countries were high. They've gradually been lifted as relations got better. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese welcomed the move, saying it comes at a critical time as the hard-hit wine industry struggles with low prices and global oversupply. China is wrapping up its annual Regional Economic Forum, and the country's top legislator Zhao Leji has reaffirmed China's commitment to open its markets to the world.
面对国际上鼓吹分裂对抗的杂音，我们要坚持独立自主、团结自强，继续做前进道路上的同行者，共同反对单边主义和极端利己主义。
Zhao also said that China aims to make technological innovation a priority in its economic growth plans. China's struggle to bounce back from the pandemic and raids on foreign companies have hurt investor confidence in the world's second largest economy in recent years. Now, Beijing is making efforts to assure and encourage global executives to do business in China. Earlier this week, Myanmar's junta said that its military rule of the country was only temporary before restoring democracy. For an update on what's happening in Myanmar and whether the junta's words can be trusted, reporter Wesley Lewis spoke with Brianne Lau, the Deputy Asia Director at Human Rights Watch in London.
The head of Myanmar's ruling junta says military rule in the country is temporary. Can the people of Myanmar and the international community believe this?
The military has always claimed that its takeover of the country in February 2021 was temporary. That's why it invoked the state of emergency, which inherently is a temporary measure. However, they've now extended that state of emergency multiple times. We're now 3 years on since the coup. So it would be hard to understand the military's current rule of the country as temporary. I mean, the only claim the military has made is that they plan to hold elections, which have still not happened, obviously. And I mean, we remain very concerned, as do many other human rights groups and observers, that any elections held under the current circumstances simply would not be free or fair.
What have been the social repercussions in Myanmar due to the 2021 coup?
I mean, Human Rights Watch has documented, a wide range of human rights abuses that have stemmed from the military coup. I mean, we see these across the spectrum, both in terms of renewed conflict and violations of international humanitarian law, forced displacement that's caused huge unmet humanitarian need. The UN currently estimates more than 18 million people require humanitarian assistance in Myanmar. But then it's also just affected the enjoyment of rights of people living across the country, whether that's in terms of their right to access to healthcare, to education, all the things that everyone needs to just live their life on a day-to-day basis.
What have been the regional ramifications due to the crisis in Myanmar?
I mean, there's huge regional ramifications of Myanmar's crisis, which is both like a human rights crisis and a humanitarian crisis. I mean, we see this in many different aspects. I mean, on the one hand, you have refugees, tens of thousands of them who have fled to neighboring countries in the last 3 years, primarily to India, as well as to Thailand. We're also likely to see a further exodus from Myanmar as a result of conscription being imposed.
Does the Myanmar military have a history of seizing power?
Yeah, so the military was in power for decades prior to the country's opening around 2010. So the military has a long history of trying to control the country and its people. That transition process that was initiated more than a decade ago was only ever partial at best because the military had drafted the 2008 Constitution, which enabled it to retain considerable power even under a somewhat more democratic system. So, past history is not particularly encouraging, and I think this is why we see the opposition groups being extremely reluctant to enter into any form of dialogue with the military unless the military is willing to completely exit the political system in Myanmar, which in Myanmar's entire history since independence, it's been unwilling to do.
That was Human Rights Watch Deputy Asia Director speaking with TaiwanPlus reporter Wesley Lewis. American-born Taiwanese basketball player Quincy Davis has received a 1-month sentence for domestic violence against his ex-wife. A Taoyuan district court sentenced Davis after he repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. Prior to his arrest, Davis's ex-wife had obtained a restraining order against him. Local media reported that the two got into an argument which escalated to pushing and shoving. The new Taipei Kings player was released on bail of just over $3,000 and was ordered to comply with the restraining order filed against him. Foreigners with disabilities are at a disadvantage in Taiwan. Most don't have the same rights as Taiwanese citizens. This discrimination also hits the children of foreigners who decide to come and set up home here. Louise Watt went to meet one such family.
Matea Maua attends this daily program in Taiwan's eastern city of Taidong. She's 20, but has a cognitive age of 3 and requires constant supervision. But under Taiwanese rules, she doesn't qualify for this type of specialized care without a certificate of disability from the government, and her parents had to search across several cities to finally find this group.
我们不接受他，那这个孩子放在家里面，他其实我们就失去了他这个不管是跟同侪的互动，或者是社会的参与等等的哈，其实都是很可惜。
Maua has cat cry syndrome, a rare genetic disorder. Her family moved to Taiwan when she was 2. But when she turned 18, they realized she was shut out of adult programs that are funded even partially by the government because she doesn't have official recognition of her disability. Special needs centres in Taiwan, like this one, say they can't accept people with disabilities without a certificate from the government, which most foreigners are not eligible for. Activists say that by not catering to the needs of foreigners with disabilities or their children, Taiwan is missing out on international talent. A recent change to the law now allows foreign residents from 4 nations with reciprocal arrangements to apply for a disability certificate, which would unlock subsidies and services. But these foreign nationals must hold permanent residency, which Maura does not, because she's in Taiwan as a dependent under her father.
In 20 years, I'll be 72. I won't be able to lift, carry, bathe, do all of those things for my daughter. And the issue now still is that if she doesn't have this disability ID, this pass, then it's hard for us to apply for any kind of help, even for a home helper, even to come in for a couple hours and just kind of help out with a few things.
Uva Maua, a former head teacher, has for 15 years helped Taiwanese families with disabled children through his own non-profit, organizing social activities and teaching them skills such as how to grow their own food. He now hopes his own daughter is not shut out of Taiwanese society. For the Maua family, Taiwan is home. They don't want to leave and hope Taiwan can embrace all members of its society, including a young woman who spent 18 years of her life here. Klein Wong and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
In a bid to tackle the environmental impact of fast fashion, Taiwan's Environment Ministry is launching a new sustainable clothing initiative. Maddie Anstruther has more.
These clothes may look brand new, but they're recycled, part of a new drive for sustainable fashion in Taiwan.
我们的衣服全部都是同一个材质，这就是我们想要从根本解决问题。因为未来这些衣服不要的时候，还是可以直接回收，重新再利用分解。
The fashion industry accounts for about 10% of global carbon emissions, more than international flights and maritime shipping combined, making it one of the planet's most harmful industries. The government is trying to change that, inviting brands and stores to join a new Sustainable Fashion Alliance, which aims to increase textile recycling and efficient use of resources.
采购部分，我们也想要从这个公家机关或者大型的行业开始。那他们在采购一些制服的时候呢，可以去采购利循环的衣服哈，譬如说是材质比较单一。
Well-known brands such as Decathlon have already joined the alliance, signalling that some in the industry are aware of the changes needed to prevent climate catastrophe.
都有很多不同环保设计的商品，门市都设有维修工作室。那维修工作室呢，就是想要鼓励，就是消费者尽量透过维修代替，就是更换或者是丢弃。
Tackling emissions and waste produced by the textile industry is a key part of Taiwan's net zero by 2050 strategy. The government released guidelines for the sector in 2023, encouraging manufacturers to use recycled materials and clothing distributors to offer recycling services. And this new alliance aims to build on that momentum to help the industry spin a new yarn for a more sustainable future. Andy Xue and Maddie Anstruther for TaiwanPlus.
That's it for this edition of TaiwanPlus News. Thanks for watching. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care, and I'll see you next time.